I won't take up too much of your time here. I enjoy this album immensely. One of my favourites of the King Crimson studio discography. I mean, I like pretty much all of the King Crimson studio albums to one degree or another, I think. The ones I like the least... Frack is decent, it's just... I'm not the biggest fan of that industrial rock 90s style, which Frack seems to embody, and so I'm just not as keen on listening to it. Islands is fine, but I feel as though if it was Islands by Islands, like just some group self-titled album, we wouldn't give nearly as much of a stuff about it. I think it's both overrated for being a King Crimson album and underrated for being a King Crimson album at the same time. Now, with Red, this is, I swear, this is a 1974 release which foreshadows every single development in the genre of metal. There's these kind of slower, doomier tracks. We have these progressive metal pieces, and plus we have something akin to atmospheric ambient black metal, perhaps, in the second to last track. Providence, that's what it is called. It is arguably the most accessible of the King Crimson albums, which is to say, someone who's acquainted with, various metal subgenres could take a stab at Red and really, really enjoy it. Someone who's really into hard rock and plays a lot of electric guitar might find lots and lots and lots to enjoy about Red. But also it's arguably the most concise, focused, and I guess reasoned, and without going too over the top of a King Crimson album. It doesn't indulge in the kind of keyboard virtuosic excess which progressive rock is, the symphonic prog cliches which some people turn their nose up at. And King Crimson were only a little bit this on the first three albums, and even then not to the same degree as your ELPs, which Greg Legg spawned after leaving King Crimson, or a Genesis or a Yes with Rick Wakeman, whoever you want to name. Well, Yes will like that, with Tony Kaye as well, to be fair. The result is an album which sounds ridiculously ahead of its time for 1974, and it makes me wonder what motivated these guys to make such music. Were they looking at the heavier music around them and sought inspiration from an act like Black Sabbath or Budgie than what Genesis or Yes were doing? That's a fascinating thought. It seems closer to a progressive rock take on this world. It's almost moving away from the jazz fusion orientations of certain, even Genesis and Yes. I think Genesis on Trick of the Tail were trying to up the ante on their musicianship to, show off to Mahavishnu or Revel Report. And you could also almost say the same thing of Yes on Relay. Going for the one and the Tomato kind of dumb it all down, so who knows. I think King Crimson on Red delivered the most palatable and, as I said, accessible product that they could during this interesting, angry era of the band. Listening to it, I just get lost in all the strangeness of the arrangements, where it's a rock group, and yet it's almost pushing the limits of what the rock band is capable of, which is to say, within the rock and roll's quote guidelines unquote, they're just and without, obviously we can talk about, what about the post-rock acts like Godspeed You Black Emperor. That's a different genre. That's just noise music played with rock instruments. This is the bare minimum, the bare extent. It's just like tearing a sheet to the threads of what what rock music can be before it becomes just outright jazz fusion, or even maybe it is just becoming a metal subgenre, if we consider that divorced at some point from the genre rock. Genres is an annoying game to play sometimes, although I'm more using the names of genres just as as a point of reference, frame of reference as to frames of mind of composition. You know what I mean? Where the artists are thinking about, King Crimson composing this in 1973/4, they're thinking about it in terms of, they're not thinking about this in terms of a heavy metal subgenre, obviously. They're thinking about this in terms of where a rock band, they don't see themselves as a jazz act necessarily. Maybe they do more than I'm giving them credit for. The thing is, if Robert Fripp refers to his rock music as progressive rather than just regular rock and roll, the reason why that's an important distinction is not because it makes one genre better or worse than another. It's more authentic than another, more sophisticated, whatever. It's more about, okay, well, Red by King Crimson in general clearly sounds different to Elvis and the Beatles, So, do we still call it regular rock and roll, or what's the go here? Oh, hey, we've got a term here, progressive rock. Yep, that's that's where I'm at with genre classifications. There's a point to which it's useful, obviously. And on Red, by King Crimson, a rock band explores the limits of what a rock band can do before we have to start considering calling it something else entirely. Not a rock subgenre even, just something like metal or jazz, or a bit progressive metal or jazz fusion, whichever asterisk we want to throw out. As to who to recommend King Crimson's Red to, if you enjoy other progressive rock acts, you'll probably enjoy this album. If you enjoy other acts considered progressive metal, you'll probably enjoy this album. Maybe genre classifications are useful because it can point everyone in the right direction of the music that they prefer to listen to. Sounds like this band, sounds like this act. Yep, check it out. I don't necessarily recommend it as one's first King Crimson album. I always recommend check out the first album first. If you if you don't enjoy that, give Red a go to see what else they were capable of. What it's worth, Robert Christgau called the first album Erzat shit, and then was quite fond of Red, I believe. And if you still don't like Red, if Discipline's too much, then you're not like King Crimson. Though I imagine it might be possible to not enjoy King Crimson in the 70s, but perhaps enjoy the 80s material. Possibly. It's a weird case, but those who are familiar with the group would understand why I could claim this. However, I allege that this video would not take too much of one's time, and I ought to keep to that. Thanks again, my friends.